You're listening to an interview taken from the Tonic talk show and podcast, heard exclusively on Zoomer Radio. To download or listen to the original episode or other episodes of The Tonic, please visit thetonic.ca.
Greg Lindberg is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and author turned wellness advocate. He attended Yale University, where he completed his bachelor's degree in economics in 1993. He's acquired and transformed more than 100 companies that were either failing or underperforming and are now worth billions of dollars. His experiences and challenges as a business leader inspired him to author 2 books, Failing Early and Failing Often, How to Turn Your Adversity into an Advantage, published in 2020, and 633 Days Inside, Lessons on Life and Leadership, published in 2022. For the last few years, his mission has been focused on helping people reach their ultimate potential through wellness, longevity, and leadership, housing all of these initiatives under his new brand called Lifelong Labs. Welcome back to the show, Greg. How you doing?
Doing wonderful, Jamie. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk, we touched upon this last time you were on the show, but today we're going to talk about fasting, which I know you are a bit of an expert on. So what is the purpose of fasting?
The simple idea is to rejuvenate your body from head to toe. Every cell in your body is deteriorating on a certain level every time it replicates, and the idea of fasting fundamentally is to fix that deterioration that comes naturally with aging.
In your estimation, when did fasting become a common practice for us human beings?
That's a great question, Jamie. It's been a common practice for really hundreds of years, maybe a couple thousand years, because religious rituals have incorporated fasting into their program for a long, long time. Fasting brings you closer to a sense of inner peace, I've found, and I think religions have caught on to that and have introduced fasting into their programs. Fasting's been part of the human program for a while.
Yom Kippur, I'm Jewish, so on Yom Kippur we fast, no food or water for 24 hours. And I can tell you when you do that, I don't know if you necessarily see God, but your perspective begins to change. You know, even over 24 hours, you can sort of feel it manifest.
Exactly.
So fasting, I think, has become more common outside of religion, though. And why do you think that is?
Well, people are looking for a way to stay healthy. They're maybe looking for natural ways to stay healthy. We've got a lot of people trying to sell vitamins and supplements and various treatments and drugs and medical interventions. And there is, I think, a passion out there for natural holistic medicine that doesn't cost you a bunch of money, that everyone can do, that's virtually free, that can rejuvenate your body completely naturally. And that's what fasting does.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the science of fasting. How does the body respond to fasting?
That's a great question. The first question is how long you fast.
Right.
And there's 3 different stages of fasting. And the very first stage of fasting, really nothing happens. If you fast for 12 hours or so, you have enough sugar in your system to effectively run your body on sugar for the whole 12 hours. If you go beyond 18 hours, you're starting to burn up your stores of sugar, particularly if you do a long run or you do some exercise in that 18 hours, and you move over a period of time during the fast, and certainly by 48 hours, and if you do exercise, you're moving to what they call a triglyceride metabolism. That means you're burning your body's fat instead of burning your body's sugar. And when you burn your body's fat, you have a triglyceride metabolism. A whole cascade of genes are introduced to your system that repair your body, repair your brain, help prevent all kinds of degenerative diseases.
So let's focus on that first stage of fasting that you referenced. What does the body do during the beginning of a fasting period?
At the beginning of a fasting period, the body will burn up its own sugar in the system, and then it'll actually create its own sugar. So it actually burns up the sugar that's circulating in the blood, the sugar that you ate for breakfast, and then it goes through a process of gluconeogenesis, which actually creates its own sugar. So the body really wants to run on a glucose metabolism, so it burns up all of your sugar first, and then it actually creates its own sugar. So you have to persist through that gluconeogenesis to the point of ketogenesis, which is a ketosis-based, triglyceride-based metabolism, after your body stops manufacturing its own sugar and starts burning your fat, which is really the whole goal line of fasting, is to get to that stage of triglyceride metabolism.
Okay, so let's focus in on gluconeogenesis. Can you sort of extrapolate on that a bit?
Well, this is where the body will take non-carbohydrate foods, so things that are not sugars like proteins, and convert them to sugar. And so the liver and the body is very capable organ in your body, and it literally will take protein in that first period of time and convert it to sugar so your body can stay on a glucose metabolism. Coming off glucose is very difficult. It's not an easy process. Your body really wants to stay on a glucose metabolism.
So, forgive me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is sort of the same effect as the keto diet, right? Where you're sort of shifting where your body gets its energy from?
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay, so, I don't know everything, but the little I do know is there are some sort of side effects that occur with ketogenesis. It's almost like people report sort of getting almost like a cold and flu-like symptoms. When you do it via fasting, do you get those same sort of side effects potentially?
That's a great question. I have been doing this. I'm on my 107th week of a 90-hour fast. I've been in an aggressive exercise routine every one of those days, and I don't experience any negative symptoms when I convert to ketogenic metabolism. When I'm burning my triglycerides after about day 2, after 48 hours of no food, I've been experiencing this for 107 weeks now, you get a feeling of calm that comes over your body. You get a feeling of wellness. You don't have flu-like symptoms. You don't have any kind of negative. At that point, your stomach is adjusted to no food, and you feel mentally at peace, and you feel a mental clarity after that 48-hour point.
Okay, so for those who subscribe to the keto diet, they are eating specific foods and sort of eliminating other foods because it fosters this ketosis, okay? With fasting, do you change your diet intake when you are eating, or do you eat everything?
That's a really good question, Jamie. I lately have noticed an increase in my performance during the fast. I have all these biomarkers that I measure during the fast. If I stick to a ketogenic diet during my feast, so I feast for 3 days a week, and during those feast days, I stick to a very high protein diet.
Yeah.
200-300 grams of protein per meal. And that really helps me avoid the sugar metabolism. The whole point of fasting is to move from a sugar metabolism to a fat metabolism. And if you eat less sugar while you're feasting, it's going to be easier to make that switch.
Okay, so you are avoiding sugars then. So I presume
Absolutely.
I presume your diet is very much like the keto diet then, right?
Exactly. And the more sugar you eat, the harder it is to make the switch. It's an addiction. You feel, if I eat a lot of sugar on the last day of my feast, I feel depressed as I move off the sugar. I actually have a sugar crash. I have depression. I have cravings. I don't feel good. It's a much harder psychological journey to come off sugar. When you just don't eat sugar in the first place, it's a much easier transition.
So I'm fascinated. You kind of threw out a comment earlier about exercise during the fast. So do you do an exercise regimen while you are fasting? Because I find that very interesting if that's the case.
Yes, I do. Right now I'm at about 120 minutes, 2 hours of exercise. On the first day of my fast, I do very vigorous cardio to try to burn up any sugar that's remaining in my system. And that's the key. If you measure how fast your body moves to a fat metabolism, it's going to move a lot faster if you burn that sugar up. And it's the hardest thing I do. Fasting is actually pretty easy compared to being at 80 hours of no food and doing a 2-hour workout. That's actually much harder than not eating itself. But it has a compounding effect. It's an exponential effect. If you exercise at 3 or 4 days of no food, your body is really pushing hard to repair itself and rejuvenate itself.
Okay, but I'm presuming that you had to build to that, right? Like how many years have you been fasting, Greg?
No question. It's taken me 3 years to get here.
Right, like you wouldn't have dreamed of doing those types of exercises early on, right? You probably wouldn't have been capable of doing it during a fast, right?
Exactly, Jamie. I was scared. If I had a morning blood draw where I had to fast in the morning, I was scared to do it. I would cheat and have breakfast anyway. I couldn't even skip breakfast.
Okay, I've taken us way off track. Let's circle back to some of the science. No. I think it's interesting. I have to tell you, like, for me, I'm like one of those guys that has to have his meals. Like, I'm very into health and wellness. It's just, I know fasting is one of those few things that happens to be working for other people. For me, the real question is whether or not it's sustainable in the long run. Like, you're a person who's been doing it for years, so I find this very interesting. Not everybody can do it.
My goal is to help people begin the journey. Every journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So take a step and move in the right direction. Every step you take towards fasting and calorie restriction is going to be beneficial to your body.
Okay, so let's talk about it because, we have listeners who are at various stages of their health, okay? And I don't know this, categorically, but, just taking a cross-section of North Americans, some people are already going to have a certain level of fitness. Some people really not at all. And in your experience, if somebody is intrigued by the idea of fasting, but perhaps are not so fit to start, what would you advise them to do? How would you, suggest that they see their doctor first? Like, what are some of the first steps?
They have to be careful if you're on a lot of different medications. If you're having some ongoing treatments, you have to make sure that the fasting isn't going to create an interference with your medications. It could have side effects if you're taking these medications while you're fasting. Interesting, by 3 or 4 days of fasting, any compound you put in your body is magnified by 5 to 10x. So you have to coordinate this with your medications. I was on very heavy-duty medications, and I came off all of them. So ultimately, your goal of fasting is to be prescription-free. This isn't one prescription to end all your other prescriptions. But you have to do it very carefully because you don't want to be taking a heavy-duty dose of something 3 days into a fast that sends your body spinning.
Okay, and I think people should use common sense, right? Like, so for example, we discussed very briefly about sort of your concerns and fears when you first started fasting. You have to listen to your body, right? Like, even though you're trying to do this, people have to be safe. Do you have any sort of safety protocols that you would recommend for somebody who's starting fasting?
The biggest one is hydration and electrolytes. You really got to be careful to keep your body hydrated. You need a lot more water when you're fasting. Food contains a lot of water, a lot of H2O content in food. So be careful. I mean, I drink a ton of water. I mean, I'm 10, 12 liters a day and when I'm fasting. And you also have to make sure you keep your electrolytes healthy. You have to, if you work out in the heat, I'm down here in Florida, and you sweat a lot, you might get dehydrated, and that'll reverse everything. That's really bad news if you're 3 days into a fast and you're dehydrated and your electrolytes are low. So there's ways to take electrolyte supplements that have potassium and sodium and these good things, and magnesium, in your water, and that can replenish your electrolytes.
I'm glad to hear you are replacing your electrolytes. Like when we were talking about sort of these fasting jags that you're doing, like 90 hours, I was wondering about that. So I'm glad to hear that you are, replacing your electrolytes. Are you also taking supplementation when you're doing these long fasts?
No, I don't take my vitamins. I just take a very handful of simple vitamins, but maintaining your electrolytes is critical, but absolutely nothing else that I take. So you want to be careful if you're on medications and talk to your doctor what that could mean.
Okay. And I presume if you're exercising, if you have a personal trainer, they should, like, really everybody should know if you're going on a program like this, right? Like anybody who's helping you, and, you should be sort of, you mentioned you're monitoring your biomarkers. Can you explain, why that's important and which biomarkers you are specifically looking at?
It's a great question, and it gives you a lot of sense of confidence to see your biomarkers going in the right direction. The number one for me is my telomere length. The Hayflick limit says that we only live so long because our telomeres will end in critically short lengths and our cells will die.
Right.
My telomeres went from critically short to 85th percentile. They went from age 60 to age 28 over the last 5 years. The average length of my telomeres is now the average length of a 28-year-old. When I was at 48, my telomeres were critically short. I had the average telomere length of a 60-year-old. They were 7.1 kilobits. Today, I just had them done a couple weeks ago. They're 8.57, which is the average telomere length of a 28-year-old. That's a great biomarker.
It is. So how often are you doing these blood works? How often are you looking at your biomarkers?
I do my biomarkers every 6 months. Try not to get too obsessive with them. But it's really important to have data. This is all science. You have to use the same testing lab, use the same program, the same format, so you don't have any kind of complications, and really watch your numbers get better. Your cholesterol, your blood sugar, your testosterone level for men, all these things, my sperm count, all these things I've been measuring and watching the numbers go in the right direction.
How long is it before people would see a difference in their bodies as a result of fasting?
Someone on my team did a 146-hour fast.
Woof.
And his blood pressure, he had heavy-duty blood pressure medicine. He had heavy-duty high blood pressure, and at the end of that fast, he went in, and the high blood pressure was gone. So he had a miraculous turnaround. 146 hours is a brutal fast. I would not recommend that.
Yeah.
He was able to do it. So it could be fairly immediate. One long fast can have a dramatic impact.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, this has been wonderful, Jamie. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You're welcome.